Good afternoon. Uh, Thank you very much for yet another series of webinar from Cyrax. This is Suresh Iyer.
This is Deepthi Bhatia.
The topic of today's webinar is emerging cyber threats in the digital age, a comprehensive risk management approach. Emerging cyber threats. Okay, now, so one thing that's become, this is no longer an important board discussion. This is amongst the top three board discussions in 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 companies today. How are we addressing the digital cyber threats? And as digital economy is moving faster and faster, everything that we wanted to see, I have known, temple darshans today are totally e-enabled. Uh, Today, the experience that we are talking about in every aspect of our life, it's gone so much digital, which means somebody is holding your information in some other place, and this data is present, getting processed everywhere. The amount of cyber threats that's susceptible is very, very high, and we as risk management professionals feel that a comprehensive risk approach is something that will be crucial and important to ensure that uh, we have the right coverage for addressing these risks. So without much ado, we would go ahead and start talking about what are the key cybersecurity risks. So cyber threats and attacks, today is, looming large across I'll talk in the next slide with much more detail uh, about how the attack and the attacks have and the cost of an attack, data breaches, unauthorized access, disclosure of public information, seeing this information in dark web, somebody is selling this personal information. This is humongous. And the amount of the documentation required to ensure that you're staying compliant on the regulatory aspects provides a whole lot of new dimension. Uh, and that dimensions are whether or not you need to address these risks. The minimum compliance standards from the regulators on cybersecurity is right now fairly comprehensive, and to an extent, many companies have adopted the technique that if they are a regulated entity by the regulators, they feel that let's go ahead and comply at the minimum to this. This itself will help us address the risks that are susceptible for our organization. Now, third party risks, which is another new dimension, because this is a world of experts. Uh, people no longer want to do everything by themselves. They want the core of their business. They do their core and allow the experts to do everything. So within for example, just the example of banking, the fintech world is doing so much product innovations that they are actually present in every leg of the banking life cycle. And they are not the banks. They are actually providing and enabling the banks to do their banking work. But all of this happens through extended API interfaces. So there's a whole lot of third-party data that gets commingled now, and therefore uh, the third party and the supply chain risks have to be clearly understood and addressed very, very well.
Yeah.
Right?
Adding to that, Suresh, every small component these days is outsourced. So everybody wants to focus on what they're best at and let the experts support them for the other business life cycles. So even developing a layer on top of a product that you would have developed is also something that will be outsourced, which is again triggering a big risk in today's landscape for everybody.
Yeah. And last but not, the insider threats, no matter, intentional or unintentional, the higher level of access is available for somebody inside the organization. He knows the weaknesses inside the setup. And therefore, the controls internally also needs to be managed, monitored, and guarded. And last but not the least, the vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities that exist in the system have become, at least most people say that, the best form of cyber defense is to, the lowest hanging fruit is, let's fix the known vulnerabilities. We don't know what is unknown, but we certainly can do what's known to us, right? So that's the key aspect relating to fixing the vulnerability. So this is the overall threat landscape, and I'll probably talk about a very, very interesting slide. This came about in a study recently, and this is not our data. This is an extracted data from IBM, and everybody has been wondering what is the cost of a data breach. Cost of a data breach globally is humongous today. I don't know if the screen is sufficiently, the fonts are sufficiently larger, but if you go ahead and see healthcare, financial, pharmaceuticals, energy, every industry is affected, and the cost of the data breach is very high in the regulated space, whether it's the healthcare or the financial and the pharma. The top three regulated industries top the cost of a data breach, and more rightfully so. Why? They are heavily regulated also, right? And if you see on the right, it tells you that your breach can come down substantially if you start implementing these controls. Okay, now one may argue, I am not having, some of them are not applicable. Okay, now this is not to be taken in its literal sense, but if you have these approaches in your defense mechanism, then your ability to combat a breach and to keep your cost of breach low is pretty high. And the favorite one for me is employee training. Okay, how look at the quantum that it is able to provide. It's able to provide the cost of breach, reduce the cost of breach by $250,000 for a breach, for one breach. Okay, now and what's the cost of training? If you look at the cost of training versus the cost that it saves just by one breach, is pretty phenomenal. And each of them have an important aspect. So now, and if you write to us after this webinar, we will share this information to you. So we'll definitely share this data for all the people who've logged into this webinar.
So an important point and question that everybody would ask: I have implemented all my controls. I have a good training program. I have good technology controls. I do my monitoring perfectly. Still, I am not 100% secure. Still, the percentage or the risk of me having a data breach is really, really high. What is the solution that we can look at to reduce that exposure? This point is addressed very beautifully by the pointer of threat intelligence. Today, threat intelligence is taken as in its concept only limited to threat hunting as an activity. But if we integrate threat intelligence, depending on their sources, as part of our daily risk management activities, we can see a lot of different results coming out of that. Taking an example of threat intel, even an advisory coming from your regulatory body is also a type of threat intelligence. So, banks, for an example, will get an advisory from RBI, these ransomware attacks or Lockbit, the recent ransomware that is there, which has shaken everybody, that you have certain steps to follow to protect yourself from that. That is also a form of threat intelligence for us today. Similarly, your operational threat intelligence, where you can have your dark web forums, your social media monitoring, that is their important parameter. Everybody today is on social media. How am I protecting myself from all those scenarios can become a key important input for you when you're doing your risk assessment activity. Any type of network patterns that you are seeing, everybody being on the cloud, you will have a lot of traffic coming onto you. What is the pattern, the trend of traffic that we are seeing in the environment? That can become an important source for us. Again, any attack vectors, everybody is now aware that, oh, I have to do a VAPT. But what is the result and how do you absorb that as part of your daily activities? That is another form of threat intel. All these sources will help us improve and enhance our traditional risk management practices to become more involved and adopt threat intel as part of our daily management activities. So, how do we go ahead and do that? For us, currently, there are two different life cycles. So, if you look at a threat intel life cycle, the life cycle will show you that I have collected sources from different information from different sources and I have done an analysis. That analysis then goes as an input for your risk identification framework in your risk identification phase. A simple example over here, again taking inputs from your CrowdStrike or your EDR or your AV platform that is implemented, which is giving you alerts on what type of malwares am I blocking. That goes as part of your risk identification framework, and then it will help you make your framework more robust. You will have more real-time risk monitoring. It will help you enhance your decision making. You will have more accurate attack related information, which again is also supporting your incident management. You are better poised to manage any such incidents. Your approach is not only reactive but proactive as well. So, this is something that is the future to mature your current posture to the next level and how to protect yourself from those attacks that we keep seeing. How do we look at that?
So here's a small example. I think third party risk is today spoken about by many institutions, and everyone wants to have a comprehensive coverage. And RBI in the banking world has clearly talked about that with a very detailed circular, what needs to be covered, how it needs to be covered. All of that's been done. But as an for any enterprise, third party risk, how it needs to be covered. Now we took the same approach of using this approach that DT talked about. How can we use it and make an effective third party risk program? Go ahead.
Okay. So, first step in your traditional program also would be to identify your critical third parties. Now, how do we have threat intelligence support us over there? We have sources like your threat intel platforms, like your Anomaly, Recorded Future, or inputs from their independent technologies like a CrowdStrike, or an attack surface monitoring framework, or a dark web monitoring framework. Inputs flowing into your environment to assess what are the risks, what are the threats, what are the threat vectors that the vendor is impacted or the third party may be impacted with, which will help you analyze how I can protect myself to reduce that risk and the impact from that aspect for us. All these become input for you when you are doing your due diligence activity. This also helps bring a very important concept of continuous monitoring for us. Considering the landscape changes that are there, the evolving threats that are there, considering the complete digital journey that we are on now, an annual calendar of assessing and due diligence to assess what my risk posture is something which is not aligning and supporting the journey today. We have to be more robust. We have to be on our toes. We have to monitor continuously. So when you are monitoring continuously, one of the sources is threat intelligence for you over here. That will help you understand at how the landscape changes, how my risk is changing, how my control framework should change so that I am protected at all times. Another example over here. Everybody is on the cloud today. When you are on the cloud, the biggest risk that anybody can see is my availability risk. How do I address that? Now, you have to identify the threat intel sources for that. You have a lot of services that are available today on all your cloud platforms that you're aware. So there is something as a guard duty that would be there. There is something called as a cloud armor that will be there, which will help you identify what type patterns going back to the threat intel sources, what patterns are there, how the trend is emerging. According to that, I can map my assets to it, what vulnerabilities would come for each of the assets that would be there. According to that, there will be a action item, a run book, a playbook that can be written to mitigate the risk that might come across from there. I can have preventive controls put across, prioritizing my DDoS prevention services, rate limiting services, having a control of a vulnerability scan, continuous monitoring to be put across, patching, one of the most critical aspects, simple control that is there in the environment that will help me avoid any of an issue with an availability attack that would be there. Conducting continuous assessments, periodic assessments, my architecture reviews, configuration reviews to avoid any kind of unauthorized changes in my environment. All these are inputs that can help put a robust risk management approach to fight with your availability attacks.
So, so that's what we have covered in a short presentation from us, talking about how using the comprehensive risk approach and how can you combat yourself in the emerging threat space. In addition to what has been talked about, Cyrax in its consulting form, we have helped various organizations in various consulting efforts, as well as managing their third-party risk posture. We have delivered overwhelming results to various companies that have transformed their security posture significantly. And we have recently launched. We are on a soft launch right now. We'll be going for a public launch sometime in April, and that's a risk management platform called Compass. Like Cyrax is an acronym, Cyber Risk Advisory and Consulting Service. Compass again is an acronym for compliance and assessments. And but Compass also has a meaning now, pointing to the right direction. And we help you point in the right direction in the cybersecurity posture in our product Compass, where all of this approach of addressing each of the threat intel sources, we can take them and integrate them into the risk management approach and have that in your daily dashboards. And that's what that's what we are ready to launch, and we'll be talking about that shortly in another presentation soon to you all. And until then, we this is just a short teaser to say that we are ready with those kind of public use cases that we think are very relevant for the CISOs today managing the threat landscape for their companies. So with that, we would like to throw open this for questions. We'll be happy to take them. Please ask your questions in your. I already have one question from Rajiv, but if there are other questions, we'll be happy to. I'll quickly take that question from Rajiv now. Rajiv's question is: today, SME, MSME companies have also become digital. For them to have an active cybersecurity measures by professionals and monitoring is very difficult, like large corporates. What do you suggest here? So, SME, MSME companies, the moment you move into digital space, irrespective of how small or how big, the monitoring that you need to do, the threat intel that you need to do doesn't change. So large companies can have their captive units, but today I think there are extremely large number of shared services players who are providing security operations as a service, and which have integrated threat intel into their platforms, which are typically the next generation platforms, not the traditional SIM, but the next generation SIMs or XDR platforms, which actually, so for a time slice of what the activity is, you can have that measured, monitored, and then you bring all the risks that are being monitored back to your risk management platform. And if you don't have a security team, talk to companies like us, Cyrax. We can provide you virtual CISO service, and that can we are doing this for over 30 odd companies now, and increasing demand for that. And we are actually seeing a significant improvement in the posture of companies where we work, and where we are able to calendarize activities, and we are able to provide quite a lot of services in that direction. So that would be my suggestion, Rajiv, and thank you for this question. Very relevant question.
Sure, Rajiv. We'll reach out to you and we will connect offline to discuss more on this.
Okay, we have another question, a similar follow-up question from Shreyas. How can small and medium-sized enterprises implement effective risk management practices despite limited resources? I think the world is, if a MSME company is a fintech company doing some, they should focus on that, and they should, the expert space is there. I'm not saying Cyrax is the only one doing it. There are a lot of companies doing this. We should tap on these professionals to do that work and ensure that a comprehensive risk management practice is implemented. I think one aspect is, if I may want to bring an element, irrespective of who does this, the risk management has to be taken up by the board and the senior executives of the company. They need to be cognizant of this risk, and if they come, they need to empower the teams to provide the necessary mitigation solutions. So those things don't change. So while they focus on building their business, they need to empower the right teams in implementing these combat strategies, so that an appropriate security posture that's right size or right fit for them is implemented. So any other questions apart from Rajiv and Shreyas?
So we have some in the chat box.
Oh, some in the chat box? Okay.
Yeah. So Amrita, how can threat intelligence sharing among organizations improve overall cybersecurity posture and enhance risk management efforts?
So it is generally, the crowdsourcing doesn't happen amongst the organizations. It happens it happens from large aggregation of all this data by cybersecurity companies who are able to get this information. So the typical threat intel sources, there are open sources, there are free feeds available, there are license feeds available, there are specific feeds for specific industries available, and I think how they are aggregating this information is a separate science all by itself, and probably have another but I think I have seen the CISOs of various BFSI industries having a shared WhatsApp group. Even that, I'm not trying to trivialize that. While that can be a great networking source, I have actually seen quite a lot of intelligence that are being shared, particularly when the large ransomware attacks happened. I was actually seeing a lot of information with saying, here is the patch update, here is the link available if you want to go ahead and take that to patch. Those are available, and I think the industry body, for example, Certain has a great website which talks about every possible threats that have been in the emerging space, and they have clearly provided the recommended solutions that are available. I think we should be proud of our country's CERT, which is doing a phenomenal yeoman job in that space. And they have aggregated information of all the threats that are affecting the company, and they also know. So they are also actively talking directly to the ISPs, where to throttle, where not to throttle, how to contain. So they have played a very significant role. So it is just not a corporate loss; it is a loss to the country, and the country has taken a very significant position there. And our digital journey is in safe hands that way, I would say. Question from Prashant: what are the common threat intel sources? So that will be another science by itself if I have to start talking about it. But Prashant, we will do one thing. We will share with you the standard threat intel sources that you should do. But ideally, look for your XDR provider or your SIMSOR provider to provide you that information. In addition to that, make sure that whatever comes out of that is being used in your active risk practice. Have you implemented this? There are so many advisories that come. Many SOC companies do not really take that seriously, and only when the actual incident happens, they actually start looking at building use case for that, and which is not a very desirable thing. Gunashri Das: what role do cybersecurity frameworks in shaping robust risk management approach? I think ISO is a bedrock platform, so that's a great thing to say how your security practices and a framework will be implemented. NIST provides a great metric-driven control approach, and I think companies that are serious about implementing a posture should take NIST fairly seriously in implementing that. Divyanshi Gupta: how can organization adapt their risk management strategies to effectively address? I think this is a repeat question, so we have already answered that aspect. Shreya: what are the key components of comprehensive incident plan, and how can organizations ensure that adequately? See, incident response is it's a very elaborate topic, but if I were to simply categorize it, I'll categorize it into 3 phases: 0 to 72 hours, 72 hours to 2 weeks, 2 weeks and beyond. So you need, and the actions required in each of them are very different. What needs to be done in 0 to 72 is very, very different. What needs to be done in 72, so in 0 to 72, you contain, you minimize your loss. You in 72 to in 2 weeks, you are mainly focused on recovery and ensuring your business as usual to absolute normalcy. And when you're 2 weeks and beyond is when you talk about how can this not repeat? How can I take a leap, a step towards getting that across, and then going and presenting to board, corporate communications with public companies, public disclosure, so many other things that come into play. So it's a very, very large space. I just built the key components, Shreya, just to in the paucity of time that we have. It's a 35-40 minute webinar, and I hope I have answered it to the extent possible in the time that we have. Sanjay Bakshi, what role do you see AI playing in cybersecurity? If I may use one word, significant is one word. If I want to say it as one word, I think machine learning and AI is so humongous, the opportunity in cybersecurity. And if you really see what has been done so far, we have just scratched the surface. The amount of machine learning and AI that has been done in retail, in e-commerce, and if you compare that, we look like a dwarf in that space. What cybersecurity has tapped on so far, but I think amongst the cybersecurity companies that have come up in the recent times, at least 50% of the new startups in cybersecurity are all on the AI-driven approach. So that's a testing testimony to your statement, Sanjay, that this is already taking shape. But I think in about a year and a half from now, you will see AI-driven companies being unicorns in the security space in a big way. Girija, usually the notification received comes with threat and recommended actions. Can you please throw light on how this can be integrated with the risk management framework? Want to take the question, Deepthi?
Yeah. So a simple pointer over here from all your threat sources or input coming from an SIM or from your SOC that can map to your assets and map to your vulnerabilities that are there in your environment. So your risk assessment can be enhanced to include your threat vectors and your threat actors, along with the likelihood and impact that will help you put a robust and holistic structure for your risk management. So this will also be driven by, yes, your knowledge base, but majority of it will be driven by your intel sources that would be there. So the different sources that we spoke about will all be covered as part of the inputs that are required for your risk management framework.
Do we have other questions? No.
No, anything. That's
all. All right. So with that, we come to a close for this webinar, and thank you very much for attending. We enjoyed talking to you, and hope it was useful. And we'll come up with more webinars, and till yet another time. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.